Okay, so I want to respond in this video to Dave Cullen, who recently made a video entitled Rediscovering Faith, My Journey Back to Christianity, and published it on his channel Computing Forever. And don't be misled by the title of his channel, because Julie Dave has not managed to keep talking about computing forever. Maybe that fits in with part of the argument that Dave is making, by the way, that we kind of kill God and replace him with ourselves and these superlative properties we attribute to ourselves, but we can't live up to it. And Julie, although Dave may at one time have thought that he could have talked about computing forever, he's only managed a few years. I'm sure if God was running the Computing Forever channel, he would manage to keep talking about computing forever until we're all totally sick to the tits of God talking about computing. Dave Cullen hasn't quite managed the same trick there, but nevertheless, he has made what was a very interesting video. I could tell it was going to be a video right up my street. And effectively what Dave is talking about in this video is how he has refound Christianity, perhaps refound God. Although it's kind of interesting that even in this video, which was Dave Cullen's eulogy to Christianity, he still effectively relegates what ought to be the central plank of Christianity, which is the existence of God, for crying out loud, to a sort of afterword in the last few minutes of the video. It was only in those last few minutes that I could actually decipher whether he actually believes in God or not, which is a little bit worrying, given that one thing that Dave Cullen bemoans is the death of Christianity in the West, and yet my observations, and I've made many of them, of Christianity in the United Kingdom is that the one thing that has been more central to its demise, and its demise has largely been the demise of the Anglican Communion, the Church of England, across most of the UK, has been the fact that it has allowed itself to dissociate belief in God from Christianity. Oh, it doesn't really matter whether you believe in God or not, just be a Christian, etc., etc., etc. And that seems to have been a kind of self-inflicted poison. And yet for the likes of Dave Cullen, even trying to head it in the wrong direction, it still seems like they're making that misstep of seeing belief in God as something kind of peripheral. I understand why for Dave it might seem peripheral, because effectively, if I can be cynical, and I'll be even more cynical a little bit later in the video, he's leveraging Christianity for his own political agenda, seemingly, rather than anything more genuine in terms of belief. At least that's how it comes across to me, the way it was sold in this video. I want to talk about this video, and I'll play you some clips in a few minutes, because I see this as just an example of something larger which is carrying on across social media, particularly on YouTube, which is that religion seems to be becoming cool again. And it seems to me, actually, that whether we're talking about the right or whether we're talking about the left, that's very difficult to do. I've got to do it the wrong way round on here for it to be the right way round for you, is that effectively what a lot of us maybe took as people's attitudes being against religion because they didn't like the bullshit, the horseshit, the bollocks that goes along with it. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth. And a lot of the bad taste that people had in their mouth was effectively because the religion in question didn't arrive at the socio-political conclusions that were for their tastes. Consequently, it seems that what we are seeing now is that a lot of people who are on the right online actually taking a more benevolent attitude to Christianity, not because they think it's true or because God exists, but because it gives them the right social solutions. It ties in with what they believe. So, hey, let's go back to Christianity. And what I've noticed is this mirrored on the left, online on the left, with the super woke brigade who have no time for the traditional aspects of Christianity, so they'll poo-poo Christianity for the bullshit and bollocks and all that lot. But apparently they're much more engaging with things like Wiccanism and paganism. In other words, they don't mind you holding whatever bullshit, bollocks, horseshit beliefs you want to hold, as long as it arrives at the socio-political conclusions that they agree with. I find that a really bizarre way of carrying on, a very self-serving way of carrying on. But it seems to be, well, it's certainly the observation that I've made recently. Okay, that's the preamble to this. Let me play you some Dave Cullen to kick off. And I want to play you some clips here, not to comment on the specifics of the clips, because it's just, to me, this is just waffle and words and bollocks, this part of the video. But I want to play you this because it sounds so much like the kind of thing that you would hear a preacher said. But this is this is before he's even got onto the religion part. This is while he's talking about social justice issues.
It seems now that a pattern is beginning to emerge among many of us who operate in this genre of red pill philosophy. When you take the metaphorical red pill, it's just the first epiphany, the first layer. You realize how much you've been lied to all your life. You discover that you've been fed an ideology perpetuated through biased narratives and spin. You begin to discern truth from illusion and reject the programming that they attempted to indoctrinate you with. Now, if the red pill is the means by which you discover that you've been lied to, the black pill is how you learn just how dangerous those lies truly were. The black pill is where you descend down the rabbit hole further and learn just how bad things have become. Things can seem bleak, but it's virtually impossible to stay black-pilled for long. It's simply too difficult to entertain nihilism or despair for extended periods of time. Eventually, an appetite for hope, optimism, and meaning begins to develop. The soul requires nourishment. Enter the white pill, also known as the God pill. You begin to desire action, order, purpose, and a semblance of values in your life.
So I gotta say, I listened to this, and that's just a couple of select cuts of this first part of the video, and what I thought is, this is some real high-level bollocks that I'm listening to here. This is just the kind of crap that you would hear a preacher come out with, really, a certain specific type of preacher, the kind of slick snake oil salesman preacher that you would hear on some kind of American God channel. And duly this argument, it sounds like Dave had an argument that he was going to put on the barbecue tomorrow, and he's had it marinating in that snake oil overnight till it's dripping with the stuff. And I get it, I understand Dave has a different perspective on the modern world to me. There are things that we have in common, things that we both look at and take issue with, but Dave has this kind of apocalyptic perspective that everything's absolutely terrible, that the world's kind of, society's coming to an end, and he hankers back for some earlier time, but I just couldn't get it. I'd heard of red pill philosophy, but now there's a black pill and a white pill, and I'm sorry, Dave, it just sounds like so much bollocks. Look, if you give me your address, mate, I have something for you. I've got one of these, you can put your pills in it, right, and it tells you what pill to take every day. That's one of the trappings of modern society, by the way, and the societies that you want to hanker back to, you probably aren't going to need one of them because they didn't have any pills. You just died while your teeth festered away in your mouth.
The Mass and the profession of faith ensure that everyone knows they are part of something bigger than themselves, that there's an authority beyond a democratically elected politician in office. This is how a nation-state is maintained, by recognizing the value of the family. As you can see, it's not hard to understand why the leftist cultural Marxists have attacked religion and the family at every turn. This is what Yuri Bezmenov covered extensively in his lectures. The subversion of America, like many Western nations, has taken place by promoting hedonism, sexuality, drugs, and the obsession with materialism, individual rights, and individualism. Anything that gets people away from Christianity, settling down, starting a family, and raising their children in the value system of their ancestors. Ironically, people are being sold enslavement as freedom. The left hates Christianity more than anything, because it can't control people who believe in something bigger than the state. It's now my belief that the greatest act of defiance we can make against globalism is to spread the teachings of Jesus Christ.
So I have really two problems with this. The first is that what Dave is trying to do is to package Christianity as something inherently right-wing. It's the position of those on the right and it's those on the left who are trying to peck away at religiosity and God belief. He says America like other Western nations, but that is a lie in actual fact. America, unlike other Western nations. I've shown the data before for the United Kingdom and duly shown it for some other European countries that back that up, that it isn't the United Kingdom that's the exception, it's America. This idea that the right is the Christian, it's the religious side, and the left is less religious, it has less God belief. That is not the case. That the decline in God belief and religiosity actually across most of Western Europe is the same on the political left and the political right. It isn't that the left wing are trying to demonize religiosity, demonize God belief. Actually, this is something that extends pretty much equally to within a percent or two across the political spectrum. The second point, which is a more deeper point, which is this idea that somehow we should be hankering, we should be looking dewy-eyed back at the value systems and the societies of our ancestors. I have to say, I don't know which ancestors these are. I look at the value systems of my ancestors, and in the recent past they were okay, but I don't regard them as superior to my own. Go back any further and I think they're an absolute load of shite. Their societies were shite. You seem to hanker back for some halcyon period in the past that I propose never actually existed. You seem to have this perspective about how terrible modern society is. In my opinion, modern society is amazing. There is no society looking back that I would rather live in than the society I'm living in now. Maybe 1892 really appeals to you, or 1523, or 796. I don't know exactly where you regard as that golden apex that you'd rather live in, but I have to say that as far as I'm concerned, it all looks pretty much universally crap. For most of the last 2,000 years, Dave, people shat in the streets. They ate and they slept, if they were lucky, in the same one room. Their children, multitudinous as they would have been, ate and slept in the same room as them. If they lived in the countryside in the winter, some of their animals would have slept in the same room. Dave, my grandmother had to shit in an outside toilet. Dave, her mother, and this is less than 100 years ago we're talking about now, was forced in her old age to go and live in a workhouse. Dave, that was their Christian society's solution to abject poverty. How moral. My aunt, Dave, back in the 1950s, and I can discuss this because she's dead now, had a child out of wedlock. Such was the social opprobrium of the time, the Christian-led disapproval to having had sex out of wedlock, that duly for the sake of her reputation and the family name, they decided to secretly have the birth, to keep it a secret from everybody they knew, and have the child adopted. How wonderfully moral that is, Dave, isn't it? That a mother was pushed in a position where it was felt that the best thing that she should do was to abandon her newborn baby, that a child should be brought up by adopted parents when there was a perfectly good and willing mother who would have otherwise looked after that child. Dave, I went to Lincoln Castle a couple of weeks ago there, and I read about a young boy called John Cook in 1861. 7 years old, this young lad, and he set fire to a farmer's haystack. Dave, his punishment for that was to be jailed for 10 years. Dave, how wonderfully moral, how wonderfully Christian of society back there. Dave, 2,000 years, almost, Christianity had to sort this kind of shit out. And in 1861, it was still getting it pretty much just as wrong as it was 1,000 years previous. Dave, so as far as I'm concerned, you can stick your social opprobrium where the sun doesn't shine. You can stick your death to homosexuals. You can stick your long-standing subjugation of women, etc., etc., because as far as I'm concerned, this golden period that you are hankering back to just doesn't exist. Things have started to get better, Dave, in the past 100 years. Now, the examples that I've given, if you've listened to those examples and you've thought, well, this isn't my Christianity, this isn't what I'm hankering back to, I'm pleased about that. But if that is the case, what you're hankering back to is not something that Christianity has brought you. It is actually something that the decline of Christianity has brought you. Because what you're hankering back never existed. In the 1800 years Christianity held a firm sway. What you're hankering back to is what started to come to pass as Christianity started to decline in the societies in which we live. Maybe that is something that you ought to bear in mind. A little bit more of Dave now.
On the Sermon of the Mount, Christ says, "Resist not evil." Now, I thought I understood this message, that this commandment made no sense. Of course we have to resist evil, otherwise it'll win. Now, recently I heard a pretty interesting interpretation of this commandment by John Butler, which was something to the effect of, don't justify evil by giving it your attention. Don't come into conflict with it, because to do so is to give it power. There is only one power in the universe, one force, not two forces. Evil is only maintained so long as people stray from the path. You empower it by giving it your attention.
Listen, for the benefit of the good viewer out there, just so you know, because otherwise you'll have no way of realising this, but I'm adding this little chunk in a couple of days after the rest of the video. How I missed this part, I will never know. Dave Cullen, champion against the idea of no platforming. No platforming, of course, that thing that started off with the National Union of Students in the UK saying that they would not platform certain ideas that they found to be effectively evil, nor would they allow their senior members to share a platform with people who espouse those views. Why? Because they didn't want to provide the fuel or the oxygen to the fire of those views. And now here is Dave Cullen doing exactly the same thing, effectively taking the same stance as Steve Shives takes, which is, oh, it's not that I'm not prepared to engage with other people, it's just that all these other people, their views are so terribly wicked, why would I possibly want to give the oxygen of discussion and publicity to views that are as wicked as that? That is exactly the same thing that Dave Cullen is doing here. He's saying, well, these views I disagree with, they're so evil. Why would we engage with these evil views? And what I can't get my head around is that this is the same Dave Cullen who only a couple of years back was organising a free speech event, the Kilroy event, and this is what he had to say back then launching that.
We're not going to get invited to an awful lot of panels by the other side very often. And I am keen to have discussions with people from the other side. We need a forum where people from all political persuasions can get together. I'm not interested in hosting some kind of echo chamber circle jerk where we don't really have productive conversations.
Dave! What has happened? What has happened the past 2 years? This was recorded in only June 2017, only 2 years ago. What has happened? You've gone from the views there to a position where you are justifying an echo chamber, justifying no platforming, justifying using the methodologies and approaches of a Steve Shives. The only difference I can discern between you and Steve Shives now is the political wing you're on, the fact that he uses the term bigotry and you use the term evil, and that you are actually using fucking scripture to try and justify the kind of approach that Steve Shives has been showing for the last few years. I tell you what has happened, Dave, the last couple of years. You had a fine hat on your head, just like I have now, and you've taken that hat off and revealed a very, very different kind of hat.
When an age of decadence is reached in a society, an age of liberalism follows. When you take God out of the equation, man tries to become God. Communism, which is once again trying to infiltrate every facet of our culture and compromise our institutions in the form of globalism, believes that the state is God, that it can be mother and father to an infantilized, powerless, and impoverished proletariat. You see, although the promotion of left-wing ideology is ultimately about power, it's also not quite as simple as a straightforward attack on conservatism. It's an attack on Christianity that goes back as far as the crucifixion of Christ, getting people away from their Christian heritage and values, disconnecting people from God, and making them docile and compliant by promoting distractions that placate the masses: consumerism, pornography, sex, instant gratification, drugs, and materialism. But deliver us from evil. So, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Now, all of a sudden, for the first time, given everything I was witnessing in the world, I could understand the context of why this prayer had been written this particular way. What has the left been promoting for the past number of decades? Temptation, sin, greed, materialism, deviation from the path. Science and religion are actually not in conflict, as some atheists believe. They're not actually in competition. One is the means by which we understand the physical world around us. The other is the means by which we derive meaning and moral instruction. This system may even form the basis of a legal system or constitution for a nation-state to live by, but the core philosophy must be based upon something that cannot be altered or replaced by man-made ideals. It's the idea that there is a higher power that man is answerable to, that governments and politicians cannot challenge.
So I've got to tell you right from the outset here is that there's quite a big gulf, I think, between Dave Cullen and I in how we view people on the left and political arguments from the left. We have some common ground in some of the criticisms that we make, and we've had some of that common ground in the past. But for me, people on the left are just people that I disagree with on some political issues. Political issues on the left are just things that I quarrel with, that I disagree with. There is not some nefarious conspiratorial global plan at work here. Whereas for Dave Cullen, I think things are a little bit different. He's like the kind of political version of a traditional conspiracy theorist in how they would talk about astronauts landing on the moon. That is how he talks about the left, people on the left, things from the left, and even things which seemingly seem entirely skewed on the right, which we're not happy with in society. Somehow, in Dave Cullen's perspective, it's the left pulling the strings behind the scene. Maybe I just haven't been red pilled, green pilled, black pilled, yellow pilled, orange pilled, and pink with purple stripe pilled enough to see what's really going on. Maybe that's what it is with regard to that. But what really gets me with this, the irony of this, is that Dave Cullen appears to be doing all the things that he has despised, all the things that he has railed against for so long. Here, many of you will be familiar with the idea, with the claim that social justice is a new religion. And what do people mean when they say that? What they're suggesting is that traditionally religion has done certain things to try and coerce and co-opt and keep people in line, to stifle discussions, to impose itself on people. And that people who are super woke in the social justice world are effectively doing some of the same things. By which I mean taking a set of morals and principles which they just happen to agree with and placing them above debate. So getting away from the sort of social contractarian conversations that underpin modern liberal societies where we debate moral issues and arrive at a consensus point and saying, I'm sorry, these things aren't open for debate anymore. This is the way it is. We're right, you're wrong. And if you don't like it, then we're going to start lumping social opprobrium upon you. Lumping social opprobrium on you just for disagreeing. But if you happen to enact a lifestyle which goes against that, then we're really going to start laying into you and trying to drag you back into line. in a perfect example of somebody espousing the principle of there being no bad tactics, only bad targets, isn't that exactly what Dave Cullen is advocating at some points in this video quite explicitly now, that what we need is Christianity to start whipping everybody back into line, because what Christianity does, as originally done, is again to place those morals and those principles above discussion anymore. Doesn't matter what you think. God says it's all these different things, so you better do it. And in the same way as the social justice crowd does it, Dave doesn't just want these things. These aren't just rules that he's going to live by. These are rules that everybody has to live by, whether you agree with them or not, or whether you like them or not. And if you question them, or if you live against them, then he will be heaping that traditional Christian social opprobrium upon you to try and force you and coerce you back into line. This is exactly the same kind of shitty tactic that he has been taking exception to over the last few years. And I have to say, and I know some people will say, oh, Jimmy boy, you're such a cynic. You really are such a cynic. But I have to say, would he have refound Christianity and refound God quite so easily if it wasn't telling him exactly what he wanted to hear? If it just didn't so happen that the morals of God just happened to agree with the morals of Dave Cullen? I wonder about that. Okay. Interested to know what your thoughts are with regard to this. Like the video, dislike the video, leave a comment, leave abuse, a death threat, whatever you fancy. If you really like my videos, you can help fund them via Patreon, PayPal or Subscribestar. Or even if you don't like my videos, you can fund them. I don't have any moral principles with regard to things like that. But I'm interested to know what you think, both with regard to Dave Cullen's video, Dave Cullen's position, and the arguments that I've made in response to them here. Okay, that'll do for now. Thank you for watching, and bye.